and necessarily turn to Christ in humility. And look here, Luke 22, verse 20, talking about the cup. And likewise the cup after they had eaten, saying, this cup that is poured out for you is the new covenant in my blood. Now, do you see here, he's got the new covenant? So it sounds as though Jesus is purchasing the new covenant through his blood for his people. Greg, you want to help unpack a little bit here about this idea of Jesus taking on the new covenant? I know there's drawing on Jeremiah 31 and Ezekiel 36.
Yeah. So hold your place there. Let's go to Jeremiah chapter 31 first. There's a couple of passages. There's more that we could look at. For time's sake, we'll look at these two right now. Jeremiah chapter 31 contains probably one of the most clear unpacking of the new covenant, the need for a new covenant, as opposed to the old covenant that God had made with Israel. Okay, Jeremiah chapter 31, beginning in verse 31, we'll read through verse 34. And now think about what you're reading here, and this is what Jesus is saying he is going to bring about through his blood. He's purchasing it, he's going to inaugurate it, get it started. The new covenant comes into being through the death of Jesus, okay? So everything that the Old Testament is promising and anticipating about this new covenant is what Jesus actually effects in his death, okay? So here we go, Jeremiah 31, beginning in verse 31. It says, behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah, not like the covenant that I made with their fathers on the day when I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt. And here's why they need a new one. My covenant that they broke, though I was their husband, declares the Lord. Verse 33, for this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, declares the Lord. I will put my law within them, as opposed to on tablets of stone. It's going to be within them, not in an ark. It's going to be in them. And look what he says, I will write it on their hearts. Wow, I will write it on their hearts. So remember, old covenant could only exert an external pressure to obey. It's what you need to do, but it gives you no power to do it. So in this new covenant, the law is not going to be written externally to God's people. It's going to be written on the inside, meaning it's going to utterly transform who we are when it's written on our hearts. Yep. No longer is it, well, that's something I should do, but I don't want to. It goes to, wow, I actually want to do what pleases God.
That's regeneration.
That's regeneration, being born again, the new birth. Let's keep going. He says, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. And look at verse 34. And this is a subtle plug for Baptists here, by the way. I won't linger on it, but it is interesting. And no longer shall each one teach his neighbor and each his brother, saying, know the Lord. Why? For they shall all know me, meaning this covenant community is regenerate. Everyone in here knows the Lord. Okay, like I said, I'm not going to linger there, but I think that's a strong argument for believers' baptism. He says, from the least of them to the greatest, declares the Lord, for I will forgive their iniquity and I will remember their sin no more. So what's going to happen when this new covenant comes? It's not going to be like the old covenant that we can break and ultimately be cast away from God because we broke it. He's going to do what? Verse 33, I'm going to put my law within them. I'm going to write it on their hearts. He's going to be their God, but in a way that Israel never experienced. They will be his people in a way that Israel never experienced. And again, they'll no longer, so this isn't going to be a mixed community. Okay, at least in principle, it's not a mixed community where you've got a lot of people who may or may not be saved living together, even though they're both in covenant with the Lord. In this covenant, everyone will be saved, and there will be a forgiveness of sins that's greater than whatever Israel experienced through the sacrificial system. It has to be. If it's a new covenant that can't be done away with like the old covenant, then the forgiveness that comes through this covenant has to be permanent. It has to be greater. It has to far surpass whatever was in the old one. Now,
let me slip in Jeremiah 32, just the very next chapter. Look at verse 39. I will give them one heart. This is the new covenant promise. I will give them one heart and one way, that they may fear me forever, for their own good and the good of their children after them. I will make with them an everlasting covenant. This is the new covenant, that I will not turn away from doing good to them, and I will put the fear of me in their hearts. Now look at this. I will put the fear of me in their hearts, that they may not turn from me. I will rejoice in doing them good. So what we're saying is this, and I want to get to Ezekiel just a second too. Ezekiel says the same thing. When Jesus died on the cross, he purchased, remember, the new covenant in my blood. Now, the new covenant includes promises about God changing our hearts and making us willing to follow him. That is secured. It's purchased on the cross. Those new covenant promises that we're going to be regenerate, the gift of the new birth, those promises are purchased by the blood of Christ. Are they given to everybody? No, because not everyone's regenerate. Who are they bought for? They're bought for all who are regenerated one day in their life. The elect, God's true people. So Jesus purchases the gift of the new birth, the gift of a willing heart. He purchases that on the cross. This is the new covenant in my blood. Who does he shed for many for the remission of sins? Who are the many? They're the sheep, the elect, the church, the bride, all who God has given to the Son to save. So it's not simply that God chooses those who will believe. No, he chooses us so that we will believe. He picks us and buys the new covenant for us so that we have a new heart. He gives us that. And once he gives the new heart, we want to follow him. He puts the fear in our heart that we would not turn away from him. So Ezekiel 36.
Well, and as we turn to Ezekiel, think about the fear thing. What does Romans 3 say? There's no fear of God before their eyes. Like, that's all of us in our sin. And so if we don't fear God, we can't make ourselves do that unless God does something radical in us. All right, so Ezekiel chapter 36. Let's look at verses, just, again, there's context and all kinds of stuff that we could draw attention to. This is a rich passage about God's future work in his people. But let's focus on the theme of God, what he's going to do inside. Again, this is new covenant terminology here, beginning in verse 25. It says, I will sprinkle clean water on you, and you shall be clean from all your uncleanness, and from all your idols I will cleanse you. And I will give you a new heart, and a new spirit I will put within you, and I will remove the heart of stone from your flesh, and give you a heart of flesh. And I will put my spirit within you and cause you to walk in my statutes and be careful to obey my rules. I think verse 25 or 25 through 27 underlies John 3, Jesus' discussion with Nicodemus. That's why he kind of chastises, like, are you the teacher of Israel and you don't know this? This clean, because Jesus says, what? You got to be born of water and the Spirit. What's this water? It's this spiritual cleansing that God's going to give, that he promised here in Ezekiel to cleanse his people with. He's going to, there's not like some spiritual counterpart where God's got like this special spiritual water. It's not what he's saying. It's language saying, I know how to change your heart so that you love and follow me. And again, this is what Jesus purchases for his people in his death on the cross. This is the new covenant, a new heart, a new spirit, wanting to walk in his statutes. Again, when he says, cause you to walk in my statutes, careful to obey my rules, this isn't like we're doing this, dragging us against our wills.
It's changing our wills.
He's changing our wills. He's changing our desires. That's what the new birth does. It gives us new desires, a new inclination, a new focus, a new trajectory in life. And that's what God is saying he's going to do. So in Luke 22, when Jesus says, this cup is the new covenant in my blood, we have to keep those Old Testament promises in mind and say, wow, that's everything Jesus is going to do through his death.
No, that's good. And I got a Piper quote here on the screen as well. Piper says, the blood of the covenant, Christ's blood, purchases and guarantees the new heart of faith and repentance that we just read about. God did not do this for everyone. He did it for a definite or a particular group owing to nothing in themselves. And so, okay, right now we're out of time, but I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, what about John 3:16? What about 1 John 2:2? He's the propitiation for our sins, not for ours only, also for the sins of the whole world. What about 2 Peter 2:1, where it says, false teachers are among us that deny the master who bought them? These are people headed towards destruction who were bought by Jesus. What about 1 Timothy 2:6 that says Jesus is the ransom for all? And what about Hebrews 2? He tasted death for all. And right, we could go on and on. So we're going to, it's cliffhanger this week, okay? We're a cliffhanger ending. We've got lots to say. It's going to take a full week to go through those texts, but we want to kind of walk through those kind of one by one and look at a lot of the main text. And I think even there you will be surprised by some of the things we're going to find next week as we look at some of the strongest objection texts to this issue. But either way, it is a glorious truth that to think, just imagine, Jesus died not just indiscriminately, he died to secure your conversion and salvation. and it was going to be guaranteed effective because of the work that he did on the cross for his sheep. He's going to lose none because of the effective work of his particular redemption. So, Jerry, can you close us in prayer?
Yeah.